Facts and Fictions, a book club podcast where we explore stories that make us feel, think, and connect. I'm Morgan.
And I'm Desiree. We're not here to dissect every word or sound overly academic. This is a space for casual, thoughtful conversation, the kind you'd have with friends over coffee.
Each week we'll talk about the books we're reading, but we'll also wander into other topics that spark our curiosity, because sometimes the best conversations happen when you least expect them.
So whether you're here to discover your next favorite read or just want a cozy place to hang out, consider us your third place, a home away from home where stories bring us together.
This is Facts and Fictions, and we're glad you're here.
Quick disclaimer, we are recording this podcast under the assumption that you've read the book and are here for book club discussion. So there will be spoilers. Proceed with caution if you have not read yet. All right, we're going to roll a quick clip of the author, Otessa Moshfegh, explaining the premise of her novel.
The book is about a woman in her mid-20s living in Manhattan, and it's the year 2000, and the book moves into 2001. She, for various reasons, decides to take on a project, which is to sleep as much as humanly or inhumanly possible for an entire year. And she does this because she convinces herself that if she can only sleep long enough, her cells will have regenerated the number of times it would take for them to have forgotten whatever trauma or memory or past had been lodged in her body or mind. So she believes that sleep is going to cleanse her of her self, which she is not too happy with. And I think that's all you really need to know.
All right, Morgan, what are your thoughts?
I really enjoyed the book. I really enjoyed Otessa's writing style. It's a dark book, which I guess I didn't expect just based on the title. I went in pretty blindly, not knowing what the premise or anything was. I just went for it and didn't expect it to be depressing. I really enjoyed reading it, and it's one that I would recommend others read, but I was taken off guard by just how depressing it is.
Definitely. I do apologize for not giving you a warning there. I also did not fully know the narrative of the book prior to reading and suggesting. Yeah, it definitely was dark. There were some humorous moments, which I appreciated. But definitely one I would also recommend to people with the forewarning of the dark nature of the book.
Yeah, it was a great book. It's not on the top of my reread list. The darkness is a little too pervasive.
Yeah.
So.
I also found it to be a pretty quick read. A very, very smooth read, I thought.
No, this is the first book of hers I read, and her writing style. Usually, I'll only say this about mysteries, where I don't want to put it down. I don't experience that much with the genres outside of mysteries, but I didn't want to put it down. I wanted to continue reading and see what was going to happen, which I thought that's very skilled, because I don't feel that way about anything other than mysteries usually.
Yeah, definitely. I 100% agree with that. And also reading this book made me interested in looking into her other work.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. I'll start diving into those when I feel mentally recovered from this one. So our nameless narrator is just trying to sleep her year away by getting a myriad of drugs from Dr. Tuttle. I found her overall to be unlikable, but I also, unfortunately, saw some of myself in her. Did you relate to the narrator at all?
I feel the same way. For example, even just referencing the author when she was describing the premise of the book, I shouldn't feel this way, I don't think, but the thought that of going to sleep and all my problems going away, that's something that has crossed my mind previously, not to the extent of securing drugs from a therapist and making it a year-long hibernation situation, but there were definitely a lot of moments in the book that I related to and saw myself in.
Yeah, I definitely felt for her and that desire to sleep. And I was just looking back at 2019 me, and it's if I had a Dr. Tuttle, I probably could have accomplished something similar. I had a Lisa back in 2019, and she told me she would stop seeing me as her client if I didn't discontinue my use of ZzzQuil, so it wasn't nearly as extreme. But I was going through a healthy amount of ZQL, and I really enjoyed that little sleep it gave me, but she said that was self-destructive. So fortunately, my therapist was good at her job and not.
I also found, speaking of Dr. Tuttle, I found her character to be so well done. And I loved her as a character. I feel like every time Dr. Tuttle came in, it was just comedy.
Yeah.
You know, but then there's also that layer of, like, what Dr. Tuttle's character kind of says about the pharmaceutical industry. That like, like, there are doctors that exist that know how to work the system and, you know, turns into a situation like this for a patient. But yeah, I love Dr. Tuttle's name, her character, her moments in the book, and yeah.
She felt very New York to me. I felt like when you're in New York, you encounter Dr. Tuttle every day, just like the very eccentric. I saw her as like a very eccentric middle-aged woman, and I was just revisiting like my time spent there. It's like, yeah, there were lots of Dr. Tuttle types. And I just found that very endearing, because it's like, okay, I feel like this character may have been written from experience that maybe the author had. Like, I feel like she was definitely modeled after somebody she's encountered. I thought she was just like too on the nose, like a really well-written character. And
I can definitely see that.
Yeah.
There's definitely depth there.
Yes, I agree. Kind of piggybacking off of that, do you think the book glorified the narrator's behaviors at all?
I don't know if it was intentional, but I definitely feel like there were moments in there that could be seen that way. Parts of it sounded enticing.
They did. I was like, I don't know if it's like a reflection of me. Like, is this a bad thing? And she didn't intend any glorification. And I'm sure there are other people reading it like disgusted. Like, oh my gosh, who wants to waste a year of their life sleeping? Not all the time, not right now. But there have been periods of my life where, and as we're entering the winter, the period of hibernation, I do feel it's more than ever seems like an enticing thing. But I don't think that was her intention. And
I think that, you know, there are probably people who didn't feel that way, but I think that anyone who has been in a dark place mentally and experienced true depression can certainly understand where the narrator's mind was during that time. You know, wanting to seclude yourself and ignore all of the happenings around you, I think is so real. And I feel like also one of the aspects of the book was how the narrator, she was doing this for an entire year, and she was able to do it because of her privilege. And I found that also very real, because there are many people, I think, who are in that headspace and want to hide, but then, you know, life is ongoing and you have to get up and go. And the fact that she was even able to do this hibernation experiment, I'm glad that that part of her character was written in, that she had the privilege to do it, and it just felt real.
That wouldn't be realistic for 95% of people who felt that way. They have to keep doing the grind, keep going day to day, but she did have that very unique position where she was able to take that year off.
Yes. To kind of continue a conversation on the different characters, what were your thoughts on Riva?
I thought it was interesting. We're getting the characterization of Riva from the perspective of our narrator, so it's hard to get like a real picture of who she is. I think the perspective we're given is that she's not, you know, quite as pretty, not quite as thin as our narrator, but our narrator, I think, had a little bit of an ego there. So she sees Riva as somebody who's very jealous and envious of her, and so that's how we read her, because we're only getting that one perspective. I found it interesting that Riva didn't intervene more. I think we're given that perspective that like they're best friends, former college roommates. I can't imagine seeing you go through something like that and being like, okay, toodles, like not doing more. I know she did at one point, like take everything. I think she should have done more. So looking at it from the perspective of a best friend, I'm like, she kind of failed her a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And to your point of seeing her from the narrator's perspective only, it does make me wonder, was Riva her best friend, but maybe not, that was not Riva's best friend.
Yeah.
Because I feel like there were multiple times where, Riva comes in and it's not, narrator's in a bad situation, barely hanging on, but Riva's coming into the picture with her own problems.
Yes.
So yeah, it definitely makes me curious on the reality of the depth of their friendship.
I would be so interested in reading a book with flipped perspectives. I could get Riva's perspective on this situation with her being the narrator. I don't know if we'll ever get that, but I do think it would paint a very different picture of everything.
100%.
I don't think we got an accurate portrayal of who Riva is through the narrator's lens, because the narrator has her issues. So she's not seeing Riva for who she is. She's seeing her for the role she plays in her own life, which I think we're all guilty of with like the relationships in our lives. But I think this was to a more extreme degree.
Yeah. I am curious your thoughts on the fact that we didn't have a name for the narrator throughout the entirety of the book. And also, if you were to give a name to the narrator, what would it be?
I was kind of thinking, I was wondering that. I was almost halfway through where I'm like, what is her name? I don't remember what her name is. Then I was going back. I was like, oh, we just don't know. My feeling there was that the author wants us to see a little bit of ourselves in the narrator, and giving her a name creates more separation. I find, especially with unlikable characters, sometimes it's hard to see yourself in them, but if they feel more like a blank slate, like, who is this? It's easier to put yourself in that position. Rather, if she was like Jane, it's like, I don't know who Jane is. Like, I don't see myself in her, but with no name, it's easier to do that. Through the book, once I realized she didn't have a name, I just kept in my head referring to her as Otessa, the author's name. I don't know if I was like critically thinking about it, if that's the name I would give her, but that is like what I ended up calling her. I feel like it fits in with the other characters' names too.
Mm-hmm. I think that that's an amazing point because I did see an interview with the author, and she mentioned that it was an intentional choice from the beginning of her writing process to not give a name to the narrator. And I think she did not say this that I saw, but I think your point of allowing the space for the readers to see themselves in the character, that has to be the reasoning. That's so on the nose, and I feel like that if that was not her intention, that was a perfect way to allow that to happen.
Yeah, I agree. I think having a name creates even more separation, because I definitely saw myself more in the narrator, even though I didn't like her, than like I did in Riva, for example.
Trevor sucks. Hated him.
Trevor.
Hated Trevor so much. He disgusted me.
Yeah, I struggle sometimes when there's not like a likable character in a book. I'm glad we had Dr. Tuttle, because she was like the one, even though, I mean, she was a little corrupt.
She's so corrupt. I mean,
At least
in her head, she is an advocate for the patient. Like,
yes.
In her head, that's truly what she's working the system because she believes that it is in the best interest of her patient.
Yes.
She's very delusional.
She's delusional. I find myself, this is a bad habit, like sometimes infantilizing older women characters, or maybe she doesn't know what she's doing. Like, she's just like a nice middle-aged lady throwing pills at our narrator, which is not a great habit for me to be in, but I do that sometimes.
That's
so
real.
I feel like she was my redeeming factor in this book full of unlikable characters. Trevor, and like, I'm so mad at our narrator. Like, what's the infatuation with Trevor? Like, he's just a loser. There are so many loser men in New York.
Oh my gosh.
Like,
he's not even just a loser. I mean, he's a loser, but he is just a trash of a human being.
Mm-hmm.
Like, every time she had an encounter with Trevor, I was just so angry.
Yes, he just seemed like such like a dime a dozen type of guy, and it's like, what
Especially
is the
in New
draw
York.
in New
Because
York?
I feel like there has to be, unfortunately, tons of those type of men walking around.
Yes. Back in what would have been 2018, for like a short period of time, when I was working in New York, I was single and I downloaded Tinder with my work friends, and we were just screenshotting profile after profile of all of these guys who were like, is this a real person? Because they were telling me how bad the dating scene in New York was. I wasn't living in New York. I was just there for work. So I was there for 2 weeks. And so we downloaded Tinder and they were just showing me, and every 25 profiles, there's one that I'm like, okay, I guess like if I lived here, I would have like swiped yes. I forget which direction that was, but I would have said yes to this guy. The men there, from stories I heard, I've got a lot of them from back when I was working there. Tricky, a tricky bunch of guys. But if that's what our narrator's drawn to, are like these unavailable, like horn dog men, she didn't have to keep going back to Trevor. She could have found a different Trevor every single night.
So true.
And maybe one of them would have ended up actually being like a decent guy.
Yeah.
That's something I really struggle with in books, like when they keep crawling back to like bad men. Stop it. I wish I could be their friend and be like, you could do better than this. She wasn't a very likable character, I'm sure.
No.
Trevor's friends might have been saying that to him too.
Yeah.
Like, stop going back to this good lady, but...
Yeah. Ugh. Yuck. That's just how I feel about Trevor. It's yuck. Yeah. So, Ping Z.
Yes, he was an interesting character. I hated the description of his dog
Oh my gosh.
display.
I actually blacked that out
Okay, yeah.
in my mind because I was also disturbed.
Yeah, I was like making my vision go blurry to like get past that point in the book. I can tolerate a lot in my books, but animal cruelty and cruelty towards children, like, yeah, that makes me so uncomfy. That was like one of my biggest, I guess, critiques of the book. I wish you wouldn't have included that. I wish you'd have, like, I get why it's there. I just didn't like it.
I agree. Wholeheartedly there. I would have been totally fine if that was not included. What are your thoughts on Ping Z kind of coming back into the picture due to the narrator needing someone, I guess, to...
I thought it was interesting that she knows who he is as a person, that he is very disturbing and eccentric, that he's going to be the one she trusts herself with while she's like in the most vulnerable state she could be in. That she doesn't have like that big community, but still she could have found someone safer for her, I think.
100%. And also, she knows that he is an artist that, in my opinion, I think exploits situations for art. So it's like, was that her intention? Was that her want? Did she want to be, exploited by him?
Yeah. I think she definitely was mentally ill, and she probably felt like because he's got the gallery representation, like he's a renowned artist, maybe it was going to give her that feeling of importance. Like what she was doing wasn't selfish, it was something she was contributing to the art world, even though I think her motivation was selfish, but she was trying to use that as a cover-up. I found it disturbing. And like, again, I'm always imagining this kind of from the outside looking in too, like trying to put myself in Reva's shoes. I know Reva thought she was at rehab, but it's like, I can't imagine like if Reva knew and like pretend you told me you were doing something like that. It's like, I wouldn't let you. And
Yeah.
it makes me sad that our narrator didn't have anyone looking out for her.
Yeah. And I think deep down she was also sad that she did not have anyone looking out for her and, preventing her from putting herself through harm, disguised as self-preservation and or a path to better.
Yeah. I think as unlikable as she came off, there's also like the big feeling of sympathy. Like she did go through that trauma of losing both of her parents. It's like you can't really imagine how you would react, especially like back to back that way, and she had that troubled relationship with her mom to begin with. So it's like I understand why she put herself in the position she did. I think it's normal to have like self-destructive behaviors when you're going through bad things, but I just want to grab her by the shoulders and shake her at the same time.
And I feel like the whole book, it was her running from her grief that was, you know, she was catapulted into that from her parents' deaths. And there was a specific part that I'm going to read here real quick that I think really is her letting on to that, you know, it does matter to her that she's alone. It's not what she wants, and she does value support, I think. So she had a house that she inherited after her parents passed away. And this is about that. She said, "I wanted to hold on to the house the way you'd hold on to a love letter. It was proof that I had not always been completely alone in the world. But I think I was also holding on to the loss, to the emptiness of the house itself, as though to affirm that it was better to be alone than to be stuck with people who were supposed to love you yet couldn't." I mean,
It's heavy.
that, and that's just one of so many points in this book that were so poignant. I have never heard of Otessa before as an author, and again, like Morgan said, you know, you said earlier, like, you're gonna have to take a beat before you can dive into more of her books, but she's so well spoken.
I would love, if I need to look into her other books, if she has anything that feels lighthearted, because her writing is beautiful, the stories she tells are not, and I need something that's written beautifully and the story itself is beautiful, like, to read in January.
Yeah.
I can't read another Otessa book in January if they're all like this.
We'll have to look into what her others.
Yeah, we really do.
Because this is number 4.
Okay, so if 1, 2, or 3 is a little lighthearted, but I feel like dark writers tend to, like, stick with that.
Yeah.
Like,
Because that's where their head is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where their head is. I'm going to read a couple other parts that I just really liked.
Oh, yeah.
One that I think we both found a little humorous was, "Only the coffee made my heart work a bit harder. Caffeine was my exercise."
This was good timing. I'm sipping my coffee.
"I can't point to any one event that resulted in my decision to go into hibernation. Initially, I just wanted some downers to drown out my thoughts and judgments, since the constant barrage made it hard not to hate everyone and everything. I thought life would be more tolerable if my brain were slower to condemn the world around me." And I feel like that is so relatable. I think, I mean, we're both, I would consider us probably anxious people. And our minds are always going a mile a minute. And we're totally not alone. I feel like our generation is filled with, you know, individuals who feel this way. We are just assaulted every day by a constant flow of information that cannot be escaped. And I think she also hit that so many times so well. Like, it was towards the beginning of the book when there's a few lines like, "So-and-so politician committed a crime. So-and-so was fat, is now skinny," etc. Like, just, there's so many things, and the amount of information we encounter on a daily basis is debilitating.
Our brains weren't developed to experience what we experience. No. I think we get so much tragedy in a day.
Yes.
Tragedy that we would have otherwise never known about if it weren't for, like, all the technology that's, like, both such, like, the best asset we have, but also our greatest detriment is, like, just that availability of information, I think, is dangerous. That's something, for, like, the last year, I've been very intentionally trying to limit my consumption of, like, tragedy and just, like, muting things on social media, not having to see things I don't want to see. I think that's my version of, like, taking my downer, because I can't handle it. I cease to function if I take in too much of that. Even just walking into my husband Garrett's office and he's always got, like, the news on, I need to reverse right back out, because I have to be very intentional about the things that I consume. I think the world does just get to be too much, and it is easy to think, like, I just need to take a Xanax to, like, not feel what I'm feeling, and sometimes it gets to that, but it's very easy to get to the point where you need that every single day if you're not intentional about what you allow into your mind. And I think that's harder for some people to do, and then if you get into that habit of, like, substances. It's hard to get out of the habit of substances.
Yes, and America is in an opioid crisis, and you just have to wonder, you know, the contribution that the media has to that, because I think it's substantial, the link between those two.
Oh, absolutely.
But especially for, I think we're very empathetic people, and I think Otessa just did such a good job of like verbalizing what it's like to live in a world that we were receiving so much negative information all the time, like a world that is unlivable, kind of.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I feel like it also, something that I think a lot of people relate to is kind of battling with not wanting to know about the tragedy, but also wanting to be informed to make a difference and, you know, to be in the know. And yeah, I mean, so
it's
relatable.
a delicate balance.
Yeah.
So the book is set in 2000, 2001, and so here's like where the premise that we're saying, we're assuming you've read this. It ends with like the catalyst that is 9/11, and the implication is that Reva was in the building and may have been one of the women who jumped, which when I first read that, I had to reread the passage because I almost felt like it was in bad taste. Like, I was imagining if I was like the family member of somebody who did like jump, it's like, how would I have felt? But I read it back over, it's like, okay, like I think she did it in an okay way, but it still gave me a little bit of pause. And I also thought it was interesting how our narrator described it as like beautiful and like she was alive or she was awake.
Yes.
That
Jarring,
yeah. And I know we're seeing it again like from that narrator's lens. It's not meant to be politically correct.
No.
So yeah, it was definitely jarring. I found it disturbing that like it seemed like she was romanticizing that moment, moment of falling, that moment of jumping, making that decision. And early in the book, I remember her talking about, I don't remember if she said she's going to jump from a building, like if the sleep didn't work. There was like some implication.
She did.
Yeah,
Yep.
So I almost feel like the ending is setting up the next step, that's the sleep didn't work. She needs to be awake the way Reva was. And I don't think the narrator lives long beyond the end of the book, was my interpretation. I was like looking at the forums. I don't know if many people agree with me. I agree with me.
I think there's two sides. I'm on your side. I also think that the narrator has not changed much. Her mindset hasn't. Her hibernation experience, I don't think that it was successful. And I think that her not living much longer, I think, is the ending that I see beyond the ending of the novel. But the other side of people believe that the ending is a way of showing that the narrator does see the beauty in every day, and kind of, I mean, just the exact opposite of what we think.
Yeah. I would be interested to see like the split of people who believe that versus what we think and how their history with mental health has been.
So true.
Because if they have trouble putting themselves in the narrator's shoes, I could see them being like, wow, she's healed, she's better. But I'm seeing this, like, she just hibernated for a year. That doesn't heal you.
No.
She buried her problems, and now they all are going to come to the surface. And if she's looking at her former roommate, her former best friend, jumping from a building to her demise, and be like, oh, that's so beautiful. Like, that's not an indication to me that she is healed. It is, like, very much the opposite.
Very much the opposite. Agreed.
That is just my 2 cents there.
Yeah. But I do find it very interesting that there is another side of people who don't see it that way.
I think they are so well. Like, I think they've just haven't had the same, like, if they can't see themselves in her, maybe they won't.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. And I just think it's so optimistic to think.
I love that for them.
I do love that for them. I think that's amazing. You know what? feel. You're doing great.
And I want you to start an optimistic podcast that I can listen to and like see. You can call it like On the Bright Side or something.
Oh,
That would be really cute.
that's very cute. Unfortunately, we disagree. And that might say a lot about us, and we just have to sit with that. But this book overall was just, I really enjoyed it. It was such a quick read. I read it, the majority of the book I read in a day. The writing was beautiful. I want to read more of Otessa's work. Did you rate this out of 5?
Yeah, I gave it 4.5.
Okay.
I thought it was great. I loved the writing. It was too heavy for me to like feel good about giving it a 5.
Yeah. Valid.
Yeah, it didn't leave me feeling good when it was over.
Yeah.
And so maybe I was a little vindictive with my rating.
I give it a 5.
Okay.
I just, there were so many takeaways I had from the book.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed it. But this book is not for everyone. I don't know. I'm not in a super dark space right now. 2 weeks ago.
Whole other story.
That is a whole other story.
But we've healed.
But we've healed since then. Well, superficially, I think. But, definitely don't recommend this to a friend who is in a dark space. But I think this is a really reflective piece of work. And a great book to be able to recommend to people who you think could enjoy it. But now, fun part. We are going to do a fan cast. And I think, honestly, we both killed it.
I agree.
So, this will be fun. Unnamed narrator. I am going to cast Sophie Turner as the unnamed narrator.
Wow, that's perfect.
Yeah.
She's so good.
I picture her so perfectly as her. Who do you?
I went back and forth between 2. So my first thought was Lily Rose Depp, but I did end up choosing Anya Taylor-Joy. But I think any of those 3 like really fit the bill.
Yes.
And
Those are both great, yeah.
I feel like I don't remember if Lily Rose Depp is tall, but
She's
I know,
short.
Yeah, that's why I ended up like that's not gonna work. Like I feel like she had so much of what I was looking for, but she's petite.
Not a model. Well, she is a model, but the tall model type. Yeah. Riva. I had a hard time with this one, I think, in comparison to the others. But for Riva, I chose America Ferrera, and I am happy with my choice.
That's such a good one. I was a little jealous when you said that. I would have thought of that. So when I was reading, I kept going back to like young Leah Michelle, like during her Glee days.
Mm-hmm.
I know she's kind of like aged out of the role now. So then I was like trying to dig deeper, and then I thought Margaret Qualley. Is that how you say her last name? Qualley?
I think so. I'm not
Qualley or
100%
Qualley?
Sure, though. I think Qualley.
Yeah, Margaret Qualley. I feel like she embodied who I imagined Reba being.
Yeah. I think I would, if we had to eliminate, I would pick Margaret Qualley over America Ferrera.
I feel like the age works better.
Yeah, I agree. And that was one thing I had a hard time with for Riva, is finding someone within the age that I envisioned. Dr. Tuttle. Gosh, she might even be my favorite character. I chose Laura Dern.
Laura Dern, that's so good.
Yeah.
I chose Leslie Mann, and I just love Leslie Mann.
I feel like they're in the same vein.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also picture Dr. Tuttle with curly hair.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, Leslie would
has
need
to
to get
have
like a
curly hair.
perm.
Yeah.
It has like the crazy curly.
Yeah, I agree. Trevor James McAvoy.
Scott Disick. He's gonna make his acting debut.
I'm obsessed. Ew. Okay. Ping Z.
I said Eugene from the Try Guys, which is like very niche back to my YouTube binging days when I was in college.
No, that's good.
Just he was like very artsy.
I picked Simu Liu.
So
I'm not
good.
even sure if that's how you say that. Simu Liu?
Yeah.
Yeah. I just love him. I really love him. I just want him to be a part of it.
Just want him to be included.
I think that's a great fan cast.
I think so too. I didn't think I was gonna be good at it, but I just need to take some time. I'm not as quick at it as you are. I had to do a lot of Googling, but I got there. Got there eventually.
Well, I think it was a good result.
Yes.
Final comments? Anything we didn't cover?
Was it weird reading it set, like, I mean, we were 6 and 7, and this when it was setting, or when it was set at 2000, 2001. So for me, it's hard to, like, even imagine. I don't remember
I don't either.
2000. So I kept, like, picturing things in modern day, and I'm having to, like, take myself back. Like, no, this was a long time ago.
I have a hard time even thinking that someone could go so long with this, like, experiment. You know, there has to be people paying attention enough to notice that this person is very unwell and someone needs to get them help.
Makes me so sad.
Yeah. But I also don't remember, like, do you remember, because people ask all the time, like, when 9/11 comes up, like, everyone knows where they were when it happened. Do you remember?
I do.
Okay. I don't remember.
It was just a unique day for me in general because I didn't have to go to school that day because me and my brother had a dentist appointment. And then I remember sitting in the living room and my brother saw it happening and he's a little kid too. So he's like, that's so cool. Thinking it was like a movie or something. And my mom coming and yelling at us. And like, we're like, why is she so mad about this movie? Like, cinema. And then it wasn't. Like, I just remember that. Like, being excited, not having to go to school. We were getting ready to go to the dentist.
Did you end up going to the dentist?
No.
Okay.
No.
I was going to say.
Yeah. We stayed home. But I don't remember anything else. I just remember that my brother said it was cool. My mom got so mad and we're like, whoa, like that's a little dramatic.
Yeah, I don't have a memory of it.
Yeah.
I believe I was at school, but I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't think I would have remembered if we had to go to school that day, but because it was already like a different day in my little first grade mind, it was like, it stuck out.
Yeah. Oh, another thing, speaking of timeline, or just in general, but the fact that, because this book was published in 2018, and I just feel like that is so interesting to me because just like the correlation with the time frame of like COVID occurring 2 years later, and while the narrator's hibernation experiment was very intentional on her end, she was intentionally sedating herself to be able to sleep, and she was isolating herself from the world, etc. It's so interesting to me that people unintentionally and or simply to get through the days were kind of going through a similar situation because of COVID, because of that everyone was isolated. I don't know the numbers or anything, but it has been mentioned that the rates of alcoholism and things related to that went up due to this.
Oh, I believe
due
it.
to the pandemic. So I just find it very timely, and also I feel like we also read it at a very timely moment with the election just occurring a few weeks ago. I really feel this is a timeless piece of work, unfortunately.
Yes, I think it's something that's going to be relevant always.
Yeah.
And
I have seen this book because one thing about this book, it's a unique looking book, and I've seen it on socials and whatnot, and it's been on my list to read for a bit. But I'm glad that we finally read it because I do think this is a memorable.
Oh yeah, I agree.
One. And fun fact, I was looking at the cover, and the cover is actually a painting. Where did I see that at? The cover is a painting by someone. The cover is a painting from 1798.
Wow.
Portrait of a Young Woman in White is what it's called. It's by Chester. It was in the Chester Dale collection at the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. So I just found that interesting. That was like the choice of
when you recommended it to me, I thought it was going to be like a period piece.
Yeah.
Just like based on the cover.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't. I was like, oh. So average outer ratings, 4.75.
Mm-hmm.
So I would recommend it if you're in the space to read something heavy.
Yes.
wait until the spring would be my recommendation.
Yes. Some people have the opposite of our seasonal depression, you know.
I know. I've seen that on TikTok where people are
Yeah.
like, oh, it's my time to shine. And I'm like, what?
So if that's you, then maybe this is the time you should read the book. But
Yes.
otherwise, wait until the sun is shining.
Yes. There are our thoughts on the book My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Otessa Moshfegh. I would love to hear yours. Leave them in the comments if you're watching on YouTube. You can email us. Our link is in the bio if you want to expand on any of the ideas we had. And we will be back in a couple weeks with our next read. Bye!